Welcome everyone to another edition of Saints TV. The teams round 2 kicks off on Saturday night against the Cats. Before we get stuck into it, I'd like to thank our sponsors, Southside Pizza, for this segment. Make sure you grab your pizza either maybe tonight ahead of the footy or Saturday night. Perfect opportunity to grab a slice before our game kicks off. I like our Saturday night slot. It used to be my favourite slot. And welcome, Evan and Ollie. Trying to be upbeat after what was, needless to say, a disappointing round 1. Evan, why don't you kick us off with, before we get stuck into the teams that have just been announced, what are your sort of key takeaways after the weekend's performance?
Yeah, if I'm trying to be positive, I can probably say we lost to Adelaide by less than Freo lost to Geelong. That's something, at least to start off with. But, at least we had some great performances from some of the kids. Even the others showed some real potential despite being a bit not as clean as they should have been as far as turnovers go. But you can sort of see a future through that, even if some of our leaders didn't stand up.
Yeah, that was sort of my take a little bit, that we just didn't get enough out of our leaders, and that's really what we need with such a young team. You need the leaders to be leading the way, and I just didn't see enough of it on the weekend. What do you think, Ollie?
I think the biggest positive for me was Max Hall. Like, at one point in the first quarter, he had all 4 of our scoring shots, 2 goals, 2. So I think that was a great find mid-season last year, and he's had a big preseason, so he's been rewarded really well. Yeah, that was probably the biggest positive. Other than that, Jack Macrae, obviously, showing exactly what everyone knew he could do and what he's good at, and why maybe the Bulldogs should have kept faith in him. Those are probably the 2 biggest ones. I don't know if there's many others.
Yeah, look, it was nice to see a debutant kickstart his career with the Saints in such a nice fashion. I think it's been a while since we've had a debutant come in and have 30-odd touches like Macrae did and really set the scene. It's a shame he didn't really have much support, particularly in the midfield, which we will touch on. I will bring up the teams now. Plenty to talk about. As you'll see, some surprises, maybe some surprise omissions as well. So first off, a shout out to Hunter Clark, who plays his 100th game, and to Isaac Kilda, who finally debuts for us. How are we feeling about Isaac and him being named in the team? Ollie?
Positive, definitely positive. A bit odd to see him in the back line. I thought he would have played as a forward, considering the struggles we had last week. With Hammer being pretty much the only option, especially if Rowan Marshall was slightly underdone last week, neither of which looked very likely to hit the scoreboard. So, yeah, I would have liked to see him named in the forward line and could have potentially swung Caminiti back or kept Ari in. But, yeah, other than that, on first look, it makes sense that Ari's not playing, considering he was a late into the squad after Machito was ruled out. As much as we all love Ari, it's probably a structural thing. I don't mind Collard. I think we needed a bit more electricity. Obviously, Higgins is electric as a small forward, but we almost looked a little bit one-paced in the forward line. There wasn't a lot going on. As soon as the ball hit the ground, Adelaide seemed to run it out pretty quickly. So,
yeah, I'd sort of tend to agree with that straight away. When I saw Keeler in the team, I was also shocked. I think Caminiti potentially may also have even made way for him as well. Evan, were you sort of along the same thinking, or are you happy to see Keeler take that sort of halfback position?
Yeah, if it was any other week, I'd definitely agree that I would have liked to see him in the forward line, bolster the tools there. But this week in particular, I'm actually really glad he's placed back there. Neil for the Geelong Cats has been really solid as that second ruck and also as a key forward. He's a monster. Is he 7 foot or something like that? He's a big fella. So I think that's the perfect spot for Keeler this week to be that second ruck. to be hopefully playing on a tour like Neil and have that experience as a key defender. I think for this specific game that it suits really well.
Yeah, that's probably a good point you raise. I mean, I always have general nightmares when we play the Cats just because I don't like them. I mean, we actually have a fairly good record against them recently, especially last year. We all enjoyed defeating them in nice sort of comeback style. It was awesome after a pretty poor first half. So I'm hoping we can produce similar, but hope is probably the key word there. Their forward line, I mean, all over the ground, but their forward line, Jeremy Cameron alone, it always poses problems. I think we've seen like Wilkie have to match up on him in the past. Maybe we'll get sort of stuck into talking about some key matchups that you see. And I guess for me, it's also really annoying when you see a player like Bailey Smith who gets to just waltz into Geelong and then he comes in and dominates with 30-odd touches and a goal. We all think McRae's had a great debut, and then you just look at Bailey Smith's stats and he's the exact player that I wish we had even when the draft came up. He's who I wanted to recruit at the time. So just really gets on my nerves when he goes and stars for Geelong already. But he's probably one to watch in terms of opposition. But, yeah, who's your sort of one to watch that we need to put a stop to, Evan?
Yeah, I was glad to see last week Bailey Smith do pretty well. It was great for my super coach. And then I remembered that they were up against us the next week and was suddenly very disappointed. But I reckon that Jeremy Cameron matchup is going to be really important throughout the ground. I reckon Wilkie has had his number a couple times, the last couple times we've played him, as far as he goes in the forward line. And particularly one of the real downsides, we'll probably try and avoid it a little bit, mentioning the Adelaide match, but their forward line was really designed to beat our current sort of back line. Whereas I'm a little bit more confident when it comes to Geelong and how we match up there. But for me, it's really when Jeremy Cameron gets down the ground that it's going to be a real issue. He runs all the way down the wing, almost gets into the back line and he starts the transition and end it. So even if Wilkie can control him, line there, how do we go about watching it all across the ground to be real good?
Thanks, Evan. I'll just give people the heads up that it is absolutely teeming where I am, so my internet's really suspect at the moment, so I am a bit in and out. So, Ollie, I might just ask you to carry on from Evan because I missed that last little sort of 5 seconds.
Yeah, no worries. I think dropping Cordy helps with the Jeremy Cameron just because of he's a little bit slow. I thought it might be worth keeping him in for size, considering Dougal's still out for a bit, but I can see why they would. Honestly, as weird as it sounds, I'm worried about Patrick Dangerfield because he's one of those guys that always, for whatever reason, seems to have his best game against us. He'll always bob up for a couple of goals out of the centre square or, he'll get clearances. It's just his one big game always seems to be against us. Look, I actually left Bailey Smith out of my Supercoach team, so I was ruining that. But I'm hoping that Windy goes to him and shows him what hard work looks like. Get a few hard balls. Maybe just make it tough. Just wear him all day. Don't let him go. If he gives away a couple of free kicks, that's okay. That sort of just wear him like an absolute glove as best you can.
Yeah, definitely think Windy's probably vital this game, and a bit of a shout out to Windy. I reckon I've been calling him Wind Hanger for his whole career. Coat hanger, wind hanger, I don't know, but I'll just Windy. Apologies, Windy. I'll have to keep.
Oh, sorry. Yes,
for a second.
It's his debut.
Hey there, you're back.
There.
Yeah.
Touched on because I'm not sure.
Well,
no, you go.
Yeah, sorry for the tech issues there. I definitely think Windhager is very important coming up this game, and he had a much better showing against Adelaide. Couple of turnovers, but as far as actually getting his hands on the ball and impacting the game, much better than he did during the practice matches there. It was definitely a bit of a return to form as far as he's been, but hopefully he can sort of get back to his first
Held
handful
his
of games
own
a couple of
and-
years back.
Yeah, he showed what he's capable of when he's not, plonked on a half-forward flank and he's, running through the midfield and he's more around the ball and gets his chance to lay tackles and to distribute the ball. So, a high-efficiency game is something I'd like to see from him, which is good, which would be good, sorry. I'd prefer low disposal, high efficiency rather than high disposal, low efficiency, high turnover sort of thing, because you prefer the ball to be getting distributed well than just racking it up and not really doing anything with it. I think you're back now, Alana.
You raise, and I think, I apologize. I'm up to the rain, so it's just really struggling. But hopefully it eases off in a minute. But I just did want to touch on Windy because I did held his own last week, and at least he could sort of build off the game he produced last week, unlike sort of some others that ran through the midfield. He did sort of have a couple of purple patches, could even have hit the scoreboard a couple of occasions along with Wilson. So I definitely liked his and Wilson's game because at least they offer.
Yeah, absolutely.
Players need to lift a little bit later on.
Cool. You're back.
Maybe I'll just go to the next segment and you guys can take over for a bit while I try and get this internet sorted. If we just come in, so what we're thinking about, obviously we touched on Kilda, but Stocker, Owens makes his return, and Collard was a little bit of a surprise. So maybe if you want to just talk through those three and what your thoughts are, if you want to kick it off, Ollie.
Yeah, I reckon Machito coming in is obviously we need him in the team. He's one of our top tier players, especially in the last couple of years. It's interesting seeing him at centre half forward. Obviously, the team that we've got now isn't going to be the team that's finalised come game time. But considering our lack of key forwards at the moment and the forward structure from last week being poor, I think he's going to be playing as a key forward like he did a little bit at the start of 2023. So hopefully, I don't know. It's worrying considering they've got a strong back line. Jack Henry was really good last week, so he would take Caminiti or Keeler, whoever's going to end up there. Blitzarves can play anywhere, and he's big. Jack Bowes, I feel like, is more of a midfield type player. Connor O'Sullivan's a young guy, but they're still taller than we are. And I think hopefully at Marvel we can play more our way than maybe at Adelaide Oval, because that's what we're used to. I'm hoping Machito gets let off the leash a little bit, but I'm worried that this week's not going to be the week. Hasty a bit stiff as well. I'm not too sure. He was subbed at halftime, not halftime, slightly after halftime maybe. And he hadn't really had much impact on the game. He might have let through a couple of goals, but I thought he'd been quite solid, getting to some decent spots. But it wasn't just his fault. Getting the ball out of defence at our turnover rate was so high. So I thought for a young guy who's only played a few games that he might have been a little bit stiff to miss out this week.
Yeah, definitely a shame with Hasty there. Obviously, we were struggling in the back line. We'll probably... Ooh. Sorry, it's a shame. He took a lot of contested marks. He was really efficient with the ball coming out of there. That definitely wasn't his impact. So hopefully he can get back into the team pretty soon there. But we'll see whose place he can kind of take amongst that mix.
I feel like he'd be jostling with I suppose Ronnie if he's on the half back line. I feel like their spot could be quite interchangeable while we've got some players missing, some of our best 22 missing, which is interesting considering I feel like Ryan Burns is more of a wing / high half forward sort of player rather than a half back. But he did have a couple of good games last year off the half back line. So, hopefully that works out for us. I feel like the Geelong game last year, he was quite good off half back, if I remember correctly. He has that impact and he can sometimes get forward and snag a goal or two. So it's going to be tough. Hopefully he goes back to VFL level and has a good impact there. I thought Harry Boyd was stiff considering it was his first game. And Rowan Marshall was I think he was only at 17% of the percent of bounces. So he shouldered the load. There was a couple of moments that you could tell it was his first game at AFL level. Like I think it was the first quarter and Ben Keys or Rochelle ended up with the goal and the goal square, but he just kind of didn't chase or go for the ball at all. He kind of just watched it. So you can tell there's, first game sort of nerves and really trying to adjust to AFL level, but I would have liked to see him on the bench still.
You're good there. Alana, should I jump in?
Mate?
Yeah, go for it, please.
Yeah, I definitely think it's a shame that Boyd's been excluded there. I think he held his own and would definitely be able to outmuscle De Koning in the ruck there. Although Sam De Koning definitely did perform better last week than he was last year as that primary ruck. But definitely still a shame. But I can definitely see why we wouldn't run Keeler, Boyd and Marshall. Although at the same time, I did really honestly think we would run with Keeler in the back line and Boyd as the primary ruck and just give Marshall a little bit more of a break. I'm sure they know better than us, but having to ice your leg at the end of the game, coming off a damaged preseason, we just cannot be risking him across that right at the start of the season. But hopefully it's a good sign that was just all precautionary.
Could almost hit Harry Boyd in the centre bounces and, because he's more of a tap ruckman against De Koning, who's more of an athletic type, and get Rowe to follow him around the ground. If that could work more, as Rowe's probably better in marking contests, contested mark, even when the ball's on the ground compared to Harry Boyd, and then Boyd could go forward and have an impact there instead.
That is true, particularly while we're so short in any case in the forward line there. There's no real harm done.
Yeah.
Perhaps
hopefully Alana's back soon.
Yeah, I might jump into the back line for a second. I'll try and remember who's there, but I definitely thought that while we see some changes back there, that personally I didn't feel that most of the defenders, everyone's partially to blame, but I don't think it was wholly their fault. We only lost one of the contested 101s as far as the tracking goes. But to sort of expand on what Jakey was saying in the podcast, I think it was 11 goals came from within 30 metres there. So when the ball's coming in that quick, it's that deep an entry, how are you really meant to compete on a 1v1 level? That's really hard to defend against as sort of a one-on-one fight. So the changes make sense to me, but I still think it's a bit of a shame to see Hasty and Sean Maker go at least to the emergency list.
Yeah, and at the same time, like that sort of delivery out of defence that, ends up in turnover, it doesn't help then the structure because all the other players are not of a defensive structure when we're trying to get the ball out. So if we turn it over from a short kick, it's coming straight back in and our defense is all out of whack. There's no zone, there's no man, there's nothing. And that's probably why they got all their goals from 30 metres out, or a lot of their goals from 30 metres out or less, because our structure was so poor considering we just turned it over. And it's not like, a long kick that's intercept marked where you can kind of get back and you can kind of man up a little bit. It's go, go, go when you turn it over the way we did. Which makes it really tough. And Geelong being a quick team, they've got Myers and Close in the forward line and Stengel as well. Well, it's going to be tough if we keep doing the same thing that we did last week. So we really got to try and hopefully the boys worked on their defensive the rebound 50s over the week. Even just going long rather than trying to go short all the time. I understand that, that's a way we like to work it. We like to go short and then keep running, but sometimes you just got to go long down the ground. And if you turn it over down there, it's better than turning over in your defensive half.
Yeah, absolutely. And definitely one of the things they touched on first crack was just how easy those repeat entries were coming in, particularly from stoppage. Something that we missed out of there was just how easily they were able to handball out of a contest and get it clear to a kicker who was able to have clear vision and not pressured kick to get it into the forward line there, which is something we were wholly missing. So perhaps that's some of the reasons we brought in some more high pressure players like Stocker and Collard, but we'll see if that matches up properly.
Exactly, and then that's where the midfield comes into it too, because you need high pressure players when you're getting the ball out in that area of the ground. Your midfielders need to help out, and they need to be putting pressure on as well. And other than McRae, the midfield effort was pretty lackluster, especially in the first half. So I actually stopped watching at about 3/4 time to watch the F1, if I'm perfectly honest. But from the parts of the game that I did see, we needed a little bit more in the midfield. Like, they were just winning the ball so easily because I saw footage of Neil Bullen pushing up off half forward, and then Naz was holding back. So that gave them an extra number around stoppage. So it made it impossible to match up. And that's why they were able to get so many clearances, especially in the first half. And then once you get a lead like that, even if we break even in the second half, you can't do anything with that. Once you've already lost the game in the first half, maybe they fought well in the second half, tried to get it back, but the game was already over.
Yep. How you doing there, Alana? Any thoughts on that one? Nope. Sorry, I think it's...
Thought about talking about Collard quickly, because there's a lot of comments coming through about why maybe he's in the team. I feel like he didn't get a good enough run last year for us to properly get a real gauge of what he can give to the team. He had a couple of games. He played against Melbourne. I can't remember what the other one was. It was Geelong. It was the first game of the season. He played against Geelong as well. I'm not sure if he played another, but he was either the sub. He was the sub in the first game. He was subbed out in the second game. And in the first game, he did a couple of good things, but he was only on for 10 minutes. And then in the second game, he didn't get any opportunity. I remember I was at the game. I was sitting pretty much behind the goals, and I was watching him. And even when he was in open positions and he could have, he had a lead and be hit on the chest, they weren't looking for him. So I think we needed to give him another shot, especially in a game like this where we might have needed a little bit more, I suppose, forward presence on the ground rather than in the air as well. To be honest, our whole forward line was lacking. But just giving him another crack, I think, is good. If it doesn't work out, then I don't mind him being in the VFL, because Dan Butler should be back in a week or two, Ross said. And Sharman as well. So just giving him a run this week, I think, is worth it. In the game, we're not expected to win. I don't know. You prefer to get the bad losses out of the season early, like Hawthorn were 0-5, 0-6 last year, and everyone knows what happens with Hawthorn. So rather than experimenting when the season's in the balance at the start, I don't mind seeing something like that.
Yeah, it's already a bit of a patchwork forward line. It's good to experiment there, but I think you're definitely right as far as I am definitely of the opinion that the sub shouldn't be a brand new player. I think it's really tough to come in halfway through the game and stamp some impact on that. I think it works a lot better with a senior player there. So pretty much every time he played last year, as you say, he was subbed on or subbed off. And I don't think that's how we can really get the excitement going and put that pressure on the other team. So I really hope that he's not just sub again as far as that goes, and he gets a full run. Particularly, as you say, it was such a one-note forward entry last time. It was either, a non-mark and they got it straight out there. Maybe Max Hall was able to get, a few marks on the run, a couple of contested goals. But I think hopefully he adds a bit more pressure, forces their backline to man up a little bit more. They're definitely a very systems-based backline. So if we can have him and Higo putting a bit more contested pressure on that forward line, perhaps they'll stick to us a little bit more. But yeah, I really looking at that list, I'm not sure who I'd hope to be the sub. None of them really, because they're all, as far as who's marked on the interchange, they're all pretty inexperienced players. And yeah, I don't know where to go off there. I'd
Probably
maybe
Clark's the
say,
one that stands out to me.
yeah.
Only because he was sub last week. I can't see Hall being sub. If you go sub, then it's over. Like, why?
Yeah.
Like, why would he be sub after such a great off season? After all that happened last season, O'Connell gives a bit of size, and then Collard would just be. I feel like that would just be a silly sub. One for his confidence, and then two for our forward line. I agree. It's a bit. I don't know. It could always be anyone though. Like we've said, that the team that's listed now isn't necessarily how they're going to line up on game day.
100%. It's probably in my head going to be Jones again from the looks of it.
Yeah.
If it's Hunter Clark again, I'll be very disappointed. He's sitting there. I think he came on in the third quarter, got 6 disposals for his time, and half of those were turnovers, direct turnovers. So obviously that wasn't unique to him, but compared to Hasty, he was pretty clean with it. Don't need that as the sub role. That's not the spark we need. But as we sort of say, there were, I think during the week that Wooden Spoon put out, there were lots of our kids that were pretty inefficient with it, and those turnovers were an issue, which doubly so against Geelong. I think I saw 14 of their goals against Freo were from turnover. So if we're rocking up there and 5 of our players are getting 7 turnovers each, we're just asking them to hit us back on the other end. So hopefully, in my head, it's Jones. He comes in with a bit of energy. Our kids would just see how they go and give them the full game to run out there for their confidence and for time on ground.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be a long, long, long night if we end up playing like we did last week. I like the Jones sub because I feel like it worked last year. But at the same time, I don't know how long we give Hunter Clark in terms of full games. Like I know he's been injured. We all know he's had a shocking run with injury. But even when he has been in the team consistently, I feel like he still hasn't burned the house down or kicked the door down even. I'm not sure what burned the house
in that context.
But I don't know. I'm starting to lose faith in Hunter a little bit. I want to, top 10 pick. I want to see him do well and succeed, but I'm starting to struggle to see that he'll be in a successful St Kilda team.
I don't even know if that's on his end. I think he's the kind of player where in my head, he needs that second club effect. I'm surprised we signed him on. I feel like he's the kind of player trade to the doggies. He gets out there and suddenly just has that burst of being re-energized, and some of that injury history dissipates a bit. And as much as that's a pain for us, I think that's probably where his career will end up.
Yeah, I know. I agree. I don't know what he brings. He's clean with the ball, and we've always said he's got maybe not we, but I've thought that he's got the Pendlebury's about him in the way he sometimes steps around people, and he's quite slow with the ball, but he always seems to be able to fashion something. So we hope he's all right. There's a comment that is from Raymond. I can't bring it up, but they've suggested that Cordy should have been a forward, and I don't mind that call. He's not the greatest in speed wise, but even a couple of years ago when he came to the club and he was playing forward, he'd still chip in with a goal or two and crash packs, and that's what we need. We need the extra height in the forward line. So considering they obviously want Keeler back or Caminiti back, I'm not sure why Cordy wouldn't be considered as a forward.
It is true that he just brings the contest more than some of the other players. It's not really what Sharman's there for when he's around, and Caminiti hasn't been able to quite hit that in the same way. So I understand that, particularly in our forward line. The more I think about it, the more, in a ways, upset I am that we gave Cordy so many games last season in the back line. I know we didn't have some of the key defenders that we picked up in the off season already, but if it feels like if Schoenmaker came into this season with 12 games behind his bat rather than 2, perhaps we'd be in a different spot. He'd be on 10 games. We'd be bringing in Barrett onto those 1 and 2 games, and it'd be a bit more balanced. But as far as Cordy in the forward line, I think there's not that next level of player just raring to get there just yet in the forward line because of our injuries. So that makes a little bit more sense there as far as I'd go. I might follow up with another comment that I saw just before in regards to how Steele and Hill will perform, that sort of leadership level that we're hoping to get a bit more expectation. I feel like I've got a unique take on this in that you can't take 34 disposals away from anyone, 12 clearances. We need those clearances desperately as far as McRae goes. But I think he's just the first part of what we need, because he had 7 direct turnovers himself and he was running really inefficient throughout the start of that game. And personally, I would have preferred maybe just even, I know it's not a 1-to-1, but if 5 of those disposals were handed off to Steele instead of McRae, Steele, who, despite his 19 touches, was really efficient, 1 turnover for the game, perhaps we're able to get a few cleaner entries into our forward line. They're bouncing back off half-back a little bit less. So I'm hoping a little bit of that Steele performance is just him and McRae not meshing yet. And when they're able to work out the clearances amongst themselves, we might get a little bit cleaner, a little bit more balanced.
Yeah, at the same time, though, you got to remember that the efficiency isn't just McRae's handball/kick. It's also the competitiveness of the forwards when it goes up forward.
Yeah.
So I think we
Very
were
true.
also at the same time, maybe he was inefficient, but it'd take forever to break down exactly why he was so inefficient for parts of the game. But it also comes down to the forwards being able to compete, and when it gets to ground level, not just let the Crows or whoever we're playing on any given week run it out of our forward line. They need to compete, they need to tackle, they need to work hard. So yeah, as much as I agree with you, and that there's sometimes you get the ball from the tap or whatever, and you need a boot. Equally, same amount of times, dish the hands to someone running past, and they can get a cleaner disposal to someone.
100%. That's what Adelaide was so good at against us, sort of thing. So hopefully that's an aspect that comes in the next sort of 10 games of the McRae midfield experience.
Do we have you back, Alana?
I think so. That was
Cool.
very frustrating. But thank you for taking charge.
Of course.
I just wanted to touch on Hill, as you mentioned, Evan. Thank you. Obviously, 1 touch to halftime is pretty inexcusable. I know it sort of maybe wasn't his type of game, but find a way to get in the game. I don't care if you go to the back line and chase a kick. To me, you just have to get involved some way or another. He ended up, I still think, somewhat like under 10 touches and a goal. So he saved himself with the goal. But do you think it's up to the coach to get Hill into the game, or is it up to Hill, the player, to take charge and go sort of get an easy possession, just find a way to get himself involved? Like, what do you think, Evan or Ollie?
I mean, it's a bit of both. I think, like, in some ways, the coach could send out a message, be like, send Hilly into the back line, get him a few touches. But at the same time, he's a leader and he's got the experience. He could have said to Angus Hasty, head up to the wing, swap the position. They can both play either position. So I think it comes down to both parties being able to make a decision on the fly as to how to get him into the game, because we know how much of a good impact he has on the game when he's playing well. So it doesn't help when your leaders, like you say, when your leaders aren't performing.
Yeah, I definitely second that. My immediate thought was it's the kind of situation where you chuck him on half back, he gets 3 quick disposals, sort of run and carry, and then he's into the game. But you're 100% right. I didn't think of the fact that if there's anyone on the field that probably has that ability and free reign to go to Hasty and say, let's just do a 1-to-1 swap. We both fit these positions. He's the one for it. So, yeah, good point you make there as far as the leadership that was specifically missing.
Yeah, and I think for me, and I'm not sure if you've already touched on this already, but like the thing with Steele is he's captain at the end of the day, and I want to see him leading the way as captain. So to me, I know like he didn't have a terrible game, but for me, it just wasn't enough when we need someone to be leading the way for our young kids, and it's frustrating because, you know, you watch the Giants and you look at someone like Toby Green and love him or hate him. He just wants that footy. He's not losing the game for that. Like he just has that drive to just will himself to every contest, throws himself in the middle, says, nah, this game is ours. And we're not losing. It's not happening on my watch. And I know that's probably asking a lot of Steele because it's comparing apples and oranges maybe, but it's just, it disappoints me sometimes when, you know, we've had the caliber of Lenny Hayes and Nick Riewoldt in the past, and I know Steele's not that person, but we'd all love him to be, and maybe just, and it's hard because I know he's carried the midfield on his shoulders for such a long time too, but sometimes you just wish he had that little bit extra oomph to just not win us the game, but just say, you know what, we're not having an embarrassing showing of a 10-goal loss. Like that's, we're not doing that anymore. It would be nice to have a bit more of that leadership, and I'm just not really seeing it, but it's round one, and I'm really hoping that he gels more with McRae and we can start seeing a bit more of a partnership in there, and eventually we get Henry in the side, and adding to that midfield, I guess. I mean, Filippo for mine is such a huge loss. He was on fire in the preseason, and I think he adds so much to this team, but we're going to be without him, and we can't dwell on the injuries too much. I'm not sure if you guys have touched on the sub yet and who you think will be the sub and who you would like to be the sub. So please fill me in if you have already, or if not, please, Evan, what is your take on the sub?
Yeah, we were briefly covering who we sort of guessed would be there because that interchange bench is so young, and just how tough it can be on a young player as the sub role. So personally hoping that Zachy Jones is the sub there. He's pretty effective with it as far as coming in with a burst of energy. But then it's just a risk of how long you leave it's a really young team on the ground there.
Yeah, and I was more of the opinion that Hunter Clark might, even though Jones might be a better option, I think that Hunter Clark might be the more likely sub just because of last week. You know, I feel like it's quite common to see, especially when the player that was subbed the week before is still named on the bench and not elevated to on field, that potentially, you know, back-to-back sub could be the sort of way that they decide to go.
Collard potentially.
I think you're
back in and out.
No, you're back. You're back.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it wouldn't surprise me if Collard's sub, but I'd like to see him get a full game. But yeah, it wouldn't.
Yeah, that's what we were saying before.
Well.
Yeah.
Let's see.
I think that I'd like to see. Look, on the captain thing that you were talking about, Alana, I think I'd like to see, or I would have liked to see at the start of the season, potentially a swap between Wilkie and Steele. Steele stays in the leadership group, but as more of a co-captain, vice captain, and Callum take the captain role, because I feel like there's been a lot of successful sides in recent history that have had a captain or someone who's very vocal in the back line. Like, you know, Darcy Moore has been very big for Collingwood, even though he's been, you know, in and out of form. Jeremy McGovern for West Coast, who have been obviously not the last couple of years, but in years prior, very successful for a long time. So I feel like I would prefer Callum, who's more vocal on field, and he's potentially more likely to give a spray where necessary rather than just head down, do the work like Jack Steele does. So even if they were co-captains, so you've got a bit of both. You've got a bit of the vocal ability of Cal Wilkie, and then you've got the Steele, just put your head down and grit and work hard.
Yeah, I've definitely felt the same way for quite some time there, a couple of years now. Just to free up Steele, so that he can get back to that form of when he first sort of took captaincy or just before that. I think the best comparison to me would probably be um, Zorko stepping away from the captaincy of Brisbane Lions, and that being shared amongst is it Harris Andrews as that key back and Lockie Neal. I think to me that's the closest comparison of freeing up a player to have a real second run, well third run I suppose with Steele, and moving that captaincy into that sort of backline general who really naturally is communicating across the entire team.
Yep, exactly.
Let's see. I'm seeing a little bit about Stocker in the chat just before. He to me is one of my favourites in his sort of role. I don't know how well he works with a combination of Garcia and Windhager all doing a similar role. But I think if Windhager is particularly focused on Bailey Smith, Stocker has a really important role potentially on Brian Myers. All throughout that game last week, Brian Myers was just setting up pretty much every single scorer involvement throughout the game before he got on the scoreboard himself. So he's a really dangerous player as far as their forward entries go. You can really slow them down. So if I was to put my 2 cents on how we get on top of this game a bit, it would be restricting our turnovers so that they, even if they got half as many goals off turnover, if they were only at 7, that would be a massive win. And if we were able to restrain the score involvements of Graham Myers by making him a bit more accountable, that to me would be the 2 most important parts of taking what Geelong do so well and turning it to our favour.
Yeah, I think that all depends on as well where they line up. I think if Bailey Smith lines up in the midfield, then potentially Stock is more likely to get the tag. Whereas if he lines up on a wing to try and throw things off, or maybe half forward, I don't think that would be the case. But if he was to move at any stage of the game, I think that would be more windy around the ground. Whereas Stock is more of a, like he tagged Cripps last year, who's more of a midfield bull rather than an outside player. So it depends on because Bailey Smith can play both. He can play both inside and outside. So I think that one depends on where he lines up.
100%, and probably similar in some ways to Patrick Dangerfield's new role, as almost playing full forward at times. And he only really came into the midfield when they started losing a few clearances in a row to Frio's mids. So potentially we just need to have a better combination of controlling those players as they go forward. Obviously, Rankin and Dawson did their work as far as both scoring and starting those scoring chains. So in comparison, I think, Dangerfield and Bailey Smith can be that this week. So we need to learn that lesson and make sure we're watching that comparison and hopefully being able to bounce back a bit more off half back by stopping that sort of chain or confusion.
Exactly. And that's the sort of game plan that we want to play more. Like we scored so well last year from back half to front half. So I'd hope that that sort of comes back into our game. And on that, I've just seen a comment pop up from Lisa saying we need to actually score ourselves. And I reckon it's a massive, I agree. And I reckon it's a massive week for Hammer because he didn't have an impact on the game at all last week. He had, just getting up the stats, he had 13 touches, no score. So he might have been all right up the ground, but we need goals. Let's be real. Considering our forward line is so depleted, a little bit better this week with Machito coming back in, but it's so depleted. I think that his role or whatever he's been playing in the last couple of weeks could realistically be a Keeler or a Cordy or a Marshall / Boyd. So I think it's really big for him this week to really show us why, and the coaches, why he's in the team. And we need to see him clunk a couple of big marks, which we've seen before. He's all right on the run. Like he's got a bit of speed on him. when he gets the ball.
Yeah.
Sometimes he needs to be a little more composed, but it's massive for him and his spot in the team, especially while Sharman's still out, considering the back end of last year that Sharman had and how important he was. It's really important for Hammer to really cement his spot in the side, I think, with a couple of goals and a few big clunks.
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds so simple, but that's probably because it's such a big issue, I suppose, that scoring is our number one struggle at the moment. Let's see. Yeah, no worries, Jakey, I imagine there. But hopefully the changes to our forward line will work to put a bit more pressure to allow our key forwards to have a bit of an easier run of it, or key forwards as they stand at the moment. But we'll see if we can line up a little bit better as far as those forward entries go. Just getting that message through. Did you want to start with your tip and margin to end up?
Sure. Well, I'll stay positive as always. I'm not gonna waver from what I say every week, and I think if we bring our best footy as anyone, we can win the game. There's a couple of people that I heard during the week saying that St Kilda's been a bit of a bogey team for Geelong in the last couple of years. 2023 was big for us, obviously. Last year was pretty big for them, considering they were going into a finals run. I'm going to say Cariniti to kick 3, Collard to kick 2, and St Kilda by 3 goals. Now, I don't say that with confidence, but yeah, I'm going to be consistent and positive and try and give a good outlook, because there's been a lot of negativity this week. So I'll try and flip the script and hope that it goes our way.
I'm going to be inconsistent then and trying to be more positive this week. Although I hold on to the fact that I was the one that was right last week. But yeah, the last couple of Geelong Saints matches that I've managed to get down to at Marvel Stadium and the like have been some thrillers there, and most of them have ended with a trip to Aisle 29. So I'm hoping for something similar along those lines there. I think our matchup is a lot more favourable compared to last week. I think Adelaide in their team format compared to our injury list is like the perfect team to beat us in a way. So that makes me more positive with our squad this week. So to a certain degree, this team looks... last week's team was really confusing to look at. You didn't know where anyone was going to end up. This week makes more sense to me, gives me a bit more hope. Looks like a bit more pressure and a little bit more stability while still leading the young kids there. So I'm going to say St Kilda by 3 points. Jack Higgins kicks a goal with 30 seconds left. It's a repeat of Carlton last year. Everyone at Aisle 29, 300 people there. That's my bet.
Yep. And then kick-ons at platform 28 after the game.
Yeah.
Do we have you back for a prediction, Alana?
I hope so.
Yep.
I'm going to go for another huge upset. Let's pip them by a point. Back to the winners list. I am so sorry, everybody, for the technical difficulties, but Evan and Ollie, you had it. Hoping these technical difficulties weren't a omen for the weekend, but we got through it as a team, so the Saints can do the same. Thank you so much for tuning in, and as always,
go Saints! Go Saints!
Go Saints!
Come on!
Go Saints!